Trailblazers, welcome back to the channel and happy launch day. Seele is now officially in the game. I've met her on the Belobog Underground, and so today's guide is on Seele, our Quantum Hunt Path character. She's the very first limited edition banner, and she's one of two Quantum Element characters, and will focus on single target damage. As per my usual guide videos, this video will cover her kit, ideal build paths, and team synergy. Now, this is my second attempt at doing this guide because I initially recorded this as a pre-release video, but I figured it would be worth re-recording and changing some things because, I mean, her light cone changed, for example, so just worth the wait. Also, before I get into the video, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the support on my video on the Hooter poll. It's like 20k views, which is great. I have like 250 subscribers now. Like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't want to keep wasting time. Don't beg it, but you know, thank you so much. Let's get into the actual guide now. Right, so for her kit review, we're actually going to start with her talent, as it's kind of the definition of her buff state, which we're going to see across a few of her abilities. It's triggered through defeating an enemy using her ultimate or starting a battle with her technique, so it's pretty important to know. Basically, the talent, Resurgent, she will enter her buff state, and upon defeating an enemy, she will receive an extra action. While in this buff state, Seele will increase her damage by 92% for one turn at level 13. So basically up to double her damage when she's in the buff state. Then, her normal attack. So Thwack, Seele deals 130% of her attack stat at level 9 to a single enemy. It's a basic attack, there's really not much to say here. Moving on. So Seele's skill, Sheathed Blade, it will deal quantum damage of 253% of Seele's attack to a single enemy, and then she's going to gain 25% of her speed to 2 turns. Remember, this is a turn-based game, so speed is very important. Her ultimate, Butterfly Flora, has an energy cost of 120, keep that in mind, and Seele will place herself in the buff state, dealing quantum damage as well, equal to 476% of her attack stat. It's a very high nuke ultimate that gets her in the buff state. Bear in mind, remember what the buff state does to her. Finally, we have her technique, Phantom Illusion. She goes invisible, she basically looks like a blue hologram, and then basically when you hit an enemy, you will enter the battle also in the buff state. All in all, she has a nice kit. The way you want to play her is by attacking enemies while in your buff state to near enough double your damage output. Remember, with all characters on banner, you can test the character herself via trial by clicking on the travelogue now and going into the aptitude showcase if you want to get a feel for her. But basically, she just hits one enemy at a time with a ton of quantum damage. With a basic understanding of her kit, let's talk traces and eidolons to see how they complement her kit as a whole. So for her first major trace, Nightshade, it gives Seele an aggro reduction when her HP is less than 50%. It's essentially a way to help her avoid damage. Her second major trace, Rippling Waves, gives her 20% advance forward when she uses basic attack, essentially giving her some nice usage out of what is otherwise just a normal quantum damage dealing attack, you know, bringing herself forward a bit quicker, nice to have. Finally, we have Lacerate, her third major trace. This is going to increase her quantum res pen, so penetration, by 20% when she's in her buff state, just making that buff state even all the more nicer. For minor trace stats across the board, we have attack percent of 28% increase, a crit damage percent increase of 24, and then her defense is 12.5% increase. Nice to see her get some attack and crit damage percent increase. They obviously make sense with a high damage output playstyle. They're kind of the stats you would expect to see. Then on to eidolons, which kind of a funny one because I lose my standard banner character spiel of like, oh, you're never going to get them, because basically it's actually not impossible to go for limited time banner eidolons, because obviously you have the 50-50 now and it's a more focused output. So we'll cover the eidolons. TLDR, I don't really think they're all that special, but we'll cover them so you know what you're going to get. And for you whales out there who want to invest highly into her, just so you understand what is blocks behind each eidolon. So for E1, extirpating slash, when dealing a damage to an enemy whose HP is 80% or lower, her crit rate is increased by 15%. Her E2 is a speed boost of her skill, and it can stack up to 2 times, so a total stacking percent increase of 75% if she can nuke out 3 characters in 2 turns, which it is doable given that in those 2 turns, because of Resurgence, she could attack up to 4 times. Her E3 and E5, it's 2 levels to her skill and talent in the E3, with 1 level to the NA and 2 levels to her ultimate in E5. This is the standard. And then E4, Fitting Phantasm. It's a 15 energy recovery when she defeats an enemy. You're looking at her basically being able to recover up to a quarter of her ult per turn, because obviously it has a 120 energy cost. You could get up to 30 energy. Finally, her E6, Shattering Shambles. When she uses her ultimate, inflict the target with a state called Butterfly Flurry, and then for one turn, they will take an additional quantum damage equal to 15% of Seele's ultimate damage every time they are attacked. Now, if you want my thoughts on eidolons, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not thrilled by anything at all. Her speed boost in the E2 is probably the highest priority option for me, but I also wouldn't care enough to go through her banner up to 6 times if I lost a pity for 3 copies of her to get this. I think all of her eidolons do complement her nuke playstyle, except her E6, which kind of feels a bit clunky to me, because on a nuke team you're not going to run many other damage dealers, so it's like, what if that turn those people who would want to get the 15% chip damage from the E6 were doing their other jobs like buffing or shielding or healing? It messes with my rotation. I don't know how I feel. I think looking at her kit as a whole, I think the one thing to be mindful of is that the resurgent state will not be triggered by bosses, because how she works is obviously as a single target damage dealer. She has to kill enemies to trigger the resurgence, which is like half of the kit. But if you're going against a boss, they're going to be like a bigger HP enemy. They're not going to die so often. So you're essentially losing part of her kit as well as the E2 and the E4. It's not everything that you lose, it's just something to be mindful of. Then on the other side of things though, things like her traces, so the basic attack advance forward and the quantum res pen with the E6 as well, really help shine in longer fights, so boss fights. So I make this comment because it's like, yeah, you lose the resurgence in some types of fights, but then you benefit from the kind of longevity of a kit in other types of fights. As a single target damage dealer, she makes sense as kind of a jack of all trades. You've got to be mindful of a kit having its pros and cons, because she doesn't just kind of line herself up to chip away at bosses specifically. She kind of gets in there for single targets and has different elements of her kit that complement both of those types of enemies, depending on how you want to take them down. But with kit covered, let's talk about builds. We'll start with light cones and then relics, although I don't know about you, I'm like 5 hours into the game and I still haven't unlocked relics, so like really low priority to worry about relics right now. With light cones, as always, I'm going to move up the ladder starting with free to play 3 stars and then go to 5 stars to cover all bases of what can benefit her. So as a hunt path character, she can take advantage of arrows, which we all got for free. It's a very basic weapon, giving you crit rate of 12% at the start of the fight. It does stack up to 24% at max super imposition, which isn't hard to do for a 3-star weapon, but it does lose its value if you don't nuke out the enemy in 3 turns or less. So it's your free to play fine option. Additionally, there's another free-to-play weapon that you will get 1 copy of, which is River Flows in Spring, just by playing the game. This weapon gives 8% speed and 12% damage increase to the wearer, but again, really difficult effect because it bounces off if she takes damage, so you need to shield or aggro attacks away from her if you want to keep the effect running. It does come back though, but still, mindful. Moving into gacha territory, there is only Silence Remains. It increases her attack by 16%, and if there are 2 or few enemies on the field, it will give her 12% crit rate increase. It's fine, I wouldn't like scream and shout over it, but it's not a bad pick on her and definitely outperforms River Flows in Spring. There's also a very nuanced pick, but I do think that Swordplay could work if you have it or get it from future weapon banners. It's kind of low priority because basically it increases damage dealt by 8% if she keeps hitting the same enemy, and it stacks up to 5 times. The reason I like this is because it fills in that void for boss fights when she can't utilize that resurgent mechanic, and kind of makes sense if you get this like stacked up 5% I'm just going to keep hitting you effect. It's, you know, it's like a nice synergistic weapon depending on the type of content you're fighting. If I had it, I'd equip it. Now, it's worth noting that In the Night got a big buff to its crit rate, but a drop to its attack and skill damage percentage over pre-reg into launch. So a superimposed 0 version will actually give you 18% crit rate now, where it rises up to 30%, and it used to give like 12 to 24. So, you know, if you factored in some previous guidance or some old numbers, make sure you pay attention, friends, because things have changed since launch. At Superimposition 0, it has 2 effects. It increases her crit rate by 18%, and then for every 10 speed that exceeds 100, the damage of her basic attack and skill is increased by 6%, and then the crit damage of her ultimate will increase by 12%, and this effect can stack up to 6%, so basically at 160 speed, you'll be at max stats. It's just crazy weapon. It has so much going on for it. It was made for her, obviously. The 18% crit rate increases is really great, but I like how the second effect encourages you to build for speed, because that's kind of what her kit also encourages you to do. Additionally, there are 2 other 5-star options which just work great on her as well. Cruise of the Stellar Sea is an increase in crit rate by 8%, and then another 8% increase to the crit rate if you are against enemies with less than 50% health. So if she defeats an enemy, she gets an attack increase of 20% as well. Just a nice all-rounder weapon. And then Yanqing's signature, Sleep Like the Dead. You can increase your crit damage by 30%, and if you don't crit, it will increase your crit rate of your next attack for another 36%. I think this weapon is pretty good, not gonna lie. There is a once every 3 turn trigger on the crit rate increase, but like it's fine. This weapon's really strong for like nuking, so it's not a bad pickup. I mean, that was a lot of light cones to consider. The whole point being that you do have a lot of free choice. You've just got to bear in mind that there's circumstances where one weapon might outperform others. Do I recommend a 5-star weapon on her? To be honest, I think she would definitely benefit from the massive upgrade the 5-star weapons give her over something like E1, to be honest. But yeah, the 5 stars definitely outperform better than the 4-star options as well. So maybe saving your Starlight for something like Sleep Like the Dead wouldn't be a bad option if you wanted to emphasize your damage dealing capabilities. She does work fine with the 4-star options given. She also works fine with the free-to-play option. But yeah, the 5-star options, they really perform well on her. Now onto relics, which like I say, I don't know when we're even going to get to the difficulty level to unlock these. I mean, it's no rush. Really just like retain the information, skip this section and file it off to another day. It's not something you need to be worried about right now. But anyway, she does have an obvious main set, so our Cavern Relic set, depending on what you're calling it, which is the 4-piece Genius of Brilliant Stars. The 2-piece effect will give her quantum damage increase of 10%, while the 4-piece makes it so that when she attacks enemies with quantum weakness, she can ignore their defense by 25%. It's a really nice set. I like it, you'll like it, we will all like it when we get it if you have Seele. Another set I wouldn't turn my nose up to is the Musketeer of Wild Wheat. The 2-piece gives an attack increase of 12%, while the 4-piece gives a speed increase of 6% and a basic damage increase of 10%. It's not the most ideal set for Seele damage output, but it definitely works well with her all the same. And I suppose, you know, early build is just a nightmare. You can come across this set more easily at 3 and 4 stars, get her on her, and then, you know, as you start to farm out in the future, then start to look at potentially shifting over to the other set if need be. And then for her planar ornaments, my main pull would be the Celestial Differentiator, as it's going to give you a crit rate increase of 8%. If you can get her to 80% crit rate, you'll get a 20% increase as well to her attack and skill damage. Again, this is way off into the future when you can farm for high level relics, so I wouldn't worry too much about how high that crit rate at 80% sounds right now, because you'll be doing all the stat management in the future, but it's definitely the set that I would recommend on her for your 2-piece planar ornaments. When looking at build as a whole, so the light cones and relics, you're essentially looking at pushing up her crit and speed with the intention to pick up attack substats where possible. For main relic stats, I would recommend crit percent on body, speed or attack percent on feet, and quantum damage on her planar sphere with attack percent or break effect percent on the rope. The game did update out break effect on feet, which is annoying, but we move and we will grind where we can. But again, I keep saying this, do not worry about relics right now. With kit and build covered, let's talk team synergy. As always, your team comps are going to need to focus on the content at hand, and I said it a lot in my pre-registration videos, and I'm saying it even more so after playing the game. It's pretty much impossible to run a standard 4 slot for everything, because there will be some content that requires nuance, like a healer over a shielder, or both, offensive utility over a sub DS, or even just elemental shifting due to enemy resistances and toughness. With that said, I will endeavour to recommend some team comps that cover off where Seele can shine. So starting with a free-to-play team, so I'm going to use the characters that we already have for free. I think running Seele with Herta, March 7th and Asta is a great way to let Seele do what Seele needs to do. So she's running as your main DPS, and then we're going to run her with a sub-DPS, aka Herta, who's going to use her AoE attacks and follow-up attacks to get enemies at low health so that Seele can come in and pick them off to trigger her own resurgence. March 7th is here to direct damage away from Seele and onto herself, while Asta is here to buff attack. March 7th role is a bit strong here because if you are running a free-to-play team, you might have one of those light cones we mentioned where they kind of fall off if you get damaged. So, you know, the aggro redrawing of what March 7th offers is undeniably pretty good here. Of course, we can sub in Serval for Herta at any time to control elemental output, and we can swap March 7th for Fire MC when you unlock them, or Natasha, depending on your survivability needs. If we start to leave free to play a bit, we can just look at Seele's balanced characters, which you might have come across by pulling her. We can swap in Paler for Asta, depending on the content, but you want to take note that you're leaving attack buffing for enemy defense debuffing here, and so this swap actually plays more into that part of Seele's kit we spoke about earlier, where her kit changes depending on the content, and so you might find in some situations slotting in Paler could be more advantageous against, say, bosses, but I mean, there are also some situations where you could double down on the offensive utility and switch out your sub DPS, so her or Saval, for Asta and Paler, so you have a combination of buffing up Seele and debuffing the enemy. We can also move into the gacha world a bit. 2 5-star characters I do think that are worth paying attention to on the Stellar Warp / beginner banner is Bronya and Welt. Bronya is just going to give you a huge attack buff synergy. I mean, she's just great with Seele because she just pushes up attack to the max. Where Welt, oh my god, he's going to let you manage enemies weak to imaginary because he's like the only one at release with this element. But also, Welt has a slowing effect in his kits, so he's going to make the speed difference between Seele's highly built massive speed stat and the enemy's debuff slow speed stat, so that Seele can just get in more actions when she needs to. The main focus here is obviously running Seele as the main DPS and making sure you pay attention to some offensive utility, whether it's a free-to-play team or a gacha modified team. I want Seele to be the main DPS stat, I need to keep her alive, and then if I can sub in characters that help boost her offensive utility, that's what I'm looking to do. Obviously in the near future, Tingyun is going to be a really strong attack percent buffer, where if you don't have Bronya but you want to swap out Asta, that's something to consider on the next banner. But for now, I'm going to keep it to those characters mentioned just because they're the characters at launch that I think make the most amount of sense when thinking of how we can build Seele and actually use her now. Overall, Seele is a very strong DPS unit with an amazing affinity for making the most out of a high investment equipment loadout, where you can forego something like eidolon spending for a stronger light cone and set of team members that will make her a huge threat to enemies. I mean, what do you think? Are you going to pull for Seele? Oh, that's so beggy, but are you going to pull for Seele? Because I think I'm going to, and even if I do, I'll definitely post a video. If you're still questioning, feel free to check out my Should You Pull video, where I debated the 2 banners, and I mean, obviously, if you enjoy the video, please do comment whether you're going to pull her or not. She's got a great character design. She's really strong. She's a, not limited element, but you know what I mean, like limited quantity element. I don't know. She's great. Thank you so much for your support on the channel, and if you learned anything, I'm glad. Good luck with all your pulls. If you do choose to pull or save, it's your choice. Just enjoy the game. There will always be more damage dealers. There will always be reruns if you don't get her this time. I shall see you all in the next one, or else. Bye!